Once, in a time long ago, when the world was still young and the creatures of the earth could speak, there lived a cunning spider named Anansi. He was known far and wide for his tricks, cunning, and cleverness. Yet, despite all his reputation, there was one thing that Anansi desired more than anything else: wisdom. He believed that if he could gather all the wisdom in the world and keep it just for himself, he would be the greatest of all creatures. One day, as Anansi sat under a tree, spinning webs of thought, an idea struck him like lightning. What if I could collect every piece of wisdom from all the corners of the earth and keep it in a pot? Then I would be the wisest of all, and none could ever outsmart me again, he thought with a sly grin. The more he pondered, the more convinced he became that this was his destiny. Determined to fulfill his grand plan, Anansi set off on a journey that would take him across the vast jungle, over rivers, and through dense forests. His first stop was the wise old owl, who was said to know the secrets of the night. With great humility, Anansi approached the owl, bowing low. "Wise owl, I have traveled far to seek your counsel. Please, share with me a piece of your great wisdom." The owl, peering down at Anansi through her large, glowing eyes, hooted softly. "Anansi, wisdom is not something to be given lightly, but I see your determination. Here is my wisdom: in darkness, one must learn to see with more than just their eyes." Anansi nodded, pretending to understand, and carefully placed this piece of wisdom into a large clay pot he had brought along. "Thank you, wise owl," he said, and with that, he continued on his journey. Next, Anansi sought out the mighty lion, the king of the jungle. He found the lion resting under the shade of a baobab tree, his golden mane glistening in the sunlight. Anansi approached cautiously, for the lion's roar was known to shake the earth. "Great lion, ruler of the savannah, I humbly ask for a piece of your wisdom." The lion opened one eye lazily and gazed at the small spider before him. "Anansi, wisdom comes with strength and patience. Remember this: even the strongest must sometimes show mercy, for in mercy lies true strength." Anansi, again pretending to understand the depth of the lion's words, placed this piece of wisdom into his pot. "Thank you, great lion," he said, his mind already racing to the next source of wisdom. He visited the slow, thoughtful turtle by the riverbank, the quick-witted monkey in the treetops, and even the tiny, industrious ant in the ground. Each creature shared a piece of their wisdom with Anansi, and he stored it all carefully in his pot. As the days passed, the pot grew heavier, and Anansi's excitement grew. He was sure that once he had all the wisdom in the world, he would be unstoppable. But Anansi was not just clever, he was also greedy. The more wisdom he collected, the more he feared that someone else might learn of his plan and steal his precious treasure. "I must keep this wisdom safe," Anansi thought. "I will hide it where no one can find it." After much thought, Anansi decided to hide the pot at the top of the tallest tree in the jungle. "No one will ever reach it there," he chuckled to himself. He tied the heavy pot to his belly with thick vines and began the arduous climb up the tree. The pot was heavy and awkward, bumping against the trunk with every step, but Anansi was determined. As Anansi struggled higher and higher, grunting with effort, his young son, Sin, happened to walk by. Seeing his father's difficulty, Sin called out, "Father, what are you doing? Why are you struggling so hard?" Anansi, panting, barely managed to respond, "I am trying to hide something very important, my son." Sin watched for a moment and then, in his innocent wisdom, said, "But father, why don't you tie the pot to your back instead? It would be much easier to climb that way." Anansi froze. He had not considered this simple solution. Here he was, with all the wisdom in the world tied to his belly, yet it had not occurred to him to make the climb easier. His son, with no pot of wisdom, had seen the answer immediately. Anansi's pride stung, but he had to admit that his son was right. Grumbling to himself, Anansi untied the pot from his belly and secured it to his back. As soon as he did, the climb became much easier. He reached the top of the tree in no time, but as he sat there, catching his breath, a thought gnawed at him. What good is all this wisdom, he mused, if it makes me forget the simplest things? My own son, without any of this so-called wisdom, was able to solve a problem that I could not. Anansi sat at the top of the tree for a long time, thinking about all the wisdom he had collected and the greed that had driven him to hoard it. He realized then that wisdom was not something to be hidden away or kept to oneself. True wisdom, he thought, was like a river that flowed freely, nourishing all who came to drink from it. With a deep sigh, Anansi made a decision. He stood up, holding the pot high above his head, and tipped it over. As the pot shattered, all the wisdom inside spilled out, caught by the wind, and was carried far and wide across the jungle. The pieces of wisdom spread to every corner of the world, touching every creature, great and small. Anansi climbed down the tree, feeling lighter not just in body but in spirit. When he reached the ground, Sin was waiting for him. "Father, what happened to the pot?" the young spider asked. Anansi smiled at his son, a new understanding in his eyes. "I have learned, my son, that wisdom is not meant to be hoarded. It is meant to be shared. For in sharing, we all grow wiser together." And so, from that day on, Anansi was known not just as a clever trickster but also as a wise teacher who had learned the greatest lesson of all, that true wisdom lies in the sharing, not in the keeping. The creatures of the jungle spoke of Anansi's tale for generations, each retelling the story with a piece of the wisdom that had once been scattered by a clever spider and his big idea. And in this way, the world became a wiser place, with every creature holding a piece of the wisdom Anansi had once tried to keep all for himself.